Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a really focused look into the religious studies arm of our program. This one comes highly requested by Sachin J. Karnik, who's the founder and CEO of Energy and Personal Excellence, LLC.
Right, and it's a deep one. We're diving into the theological and practical structure of Gachi Vedanta.
And our main source text is a big one, the 16th century classic by Rupa Goswami, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu.
It really is monumental. You can think of it as a kind of spiritual curriculum, incredibly dense, all about mapping out devotional love, which is bhakti.
Okay, so our mission today, ambitious, you said.
I think so, yeah. We need to really unpack this framework to find the core ideas, the metaphysics, which are surprisingly specific, actually, and then look at the spiritual goals, the hierarchy Rupa Goswami lays out.
Got it. And this text, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we'll probably just call it the BRS to make it easier.
Yeah, BRS works.
Okay. The name itself, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it feels significant, like it's setting a tone right away. What's packed into that name?
Oh, absolutely. It's a beautiful summary of the whole point of the text. It literally translates to something like the ocean of the nectar of the rasa.
Rasa.
Meaning the ecstatic experience, the spiritual flavor or mood of bhakti, of devotion. So the ocean of nectar of the ecstatic experience of devotion.
Wow. Okay. That's quite a title. And Rupa Goswami, he was a key figure, right?
Yeah.
A disciple of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
A primary disciple, yes. Sri Chaitanya really spearheaded this renaissance of Krishna Bhakti back in the 16th century. Rupa Goswami's job is basically to systematize this very emotional, very personal path, to make it accessible but still philosophically solid, like a manual.
And the structure, I read it's organized, maybe like the Yoga Sutras,
Yeah.
into distinct sections.
That's a good comparison. It's divided into 4 main parts, or quadrants, Eastern, Southern, Western, and Northern. Each one deals with a different aspect or stage of spiritual growth.
And which part are we focusing on today?
We're mainly digging into the Eastern quadrant. That's where Rupa Goswami lays out the foundational practices, what they call sadhana, and then how that leads to the dawning of this core spiritual emotion, bhava, and eventually culminates in the ultimate goal, which is prema, or supreme love.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the title uses ocean. I found that core metaphor right at the beginning really powerful. It seems to set the scale of what this path is aiming for.
It's incredibly effective, and it's doing theological work right from page 1. Rupa Goswami uses it to draw this radical distinction, both quantitative and qualitative, between the bliss you get from bhakti and the bliss from other major Indian paths, like, say, jhana, knowledge, or yoga, which often focus on impersonal realization.
So how does the metaphor work?
He compares the bliss of bhakti, the sheer, immeasurable, dynamic joy, to an infinite ocean. And then in contrast, the bliss of the individual soul, the Atman, when it experiences self-absorption, like merging with the impersonal absolute. He says that's tiny, trivial, like the little bit of water you'd find in a calf's hoof print after it rains.
Wow, that is a stark comparison. It's like saying right off the bat, look, we're not aiming for absorption here. We're aiming for something much, much bigger, something relational.
Exactly. It sets the stage perfectly. And before we go deeper, we should mention, as requested by the source of this deep dive, Sachin Karnik conducts daily satsang online. All are welcome to join.
Good reminder.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into that foundation. To really get the practices, we need the philosophy underneath, right? Gacha Vedanta is devotional, it's dualistic in a sense. God and soul are distinct. But how does it explain the connection? What's the architecture?
Okay, yeah, the starting point has to be what's called the divine energy theory, or Shakti Tattva. This is really the bedrock of their cosmology. And it's what makes this school distinct from, say, Advaita Vedanta, which often sees the material world as ultimately an illusion, Maya.
Right, the world is illusion. But that's not the case here.
Not at all. Shakti Tattva says the whole cosmos, spiritual world, material world, everything isn't some separate creation. It's actually a manifestation of the Lord's own intrinsic energies. It's less about creation ex nihilo and more about, well, what you could call an energetic ontology.
Okay, hold on. Energetic ontology. So the universe isn't just something God made. It is like an expression of God's own being, like living conscious energy.
Precisely. It's made of God's energy, and that immediately forces you to define the relationships between everything. Which brings us to the first key principle, Dravya Abheda.
Dravya Abheda, meaning
Literally non-difference in substance. The idea here is that all levels of reality, from Shrika himself all the way down to, rocks and water in the material world, they all share one single ontological foundation, one substance.
Okay, but wait. If everything's fundamentally the same substance, how does this not just become Advaita again? How do they maintain the distinction needed for devotion?
That's the crucial point. The underlying substance is identified as living consciousness, or sit. And this consciousness is the inherent energy, the Shakti of the Supreme Being, Shusti Don, who is called Shaktiman, the possessor of the energy.
Okay.
So everything differs only in its function, its vyaparbeda, how it manifests and operates, not in its essential composition. Think of gold, maybe.
Yeah.
You can have a gold statue, a gold chain, a gold coin. They all look different. They're used for different things, different functions, but they're all fundamentally gold.
Right. Same substance, different forms and uses.
Exactly. Gacchavavedanta insists that these differences in function are real and they're eternal. And that's what allows for an eternal relationship. The difference isn't just temporary or illusory.
Got it. So unified substance, but real functional difference, which means you still need to explain the relationship between the energy, the universe, the souls, and the energetic source. Okay.
And that leads to the second principle, Shakti Shaktiman Abheda, the non-difference between the energy, Shakti, and the possessor of the energy, Shaktiman.
Non-difference. But they are different functionally. How does that work?
Think of the sun and sunlight. Are they different? Well, yes, functionally. One is the source, the other is the emanation. But are they separable? Can you have sunlight without the sun?
No, of course not.
They are distinct in their roles, but inseparable in their essence. That's the idea. Khalsa remains fully transcendent, complete, unchanged, even while his energy permeates and constitutes everything. It allows for what's sometimes called relational non-dualism.
Relational non-dualism.
Yeah.
Okay. One substance, functionally distinct entities. Sun and sunlight. But still, it feels like a bit of a paradox, doesn't it? Being one and different at the same time.
Ah, yes. And they lean right into that paradox. That's the third and arguably the most central and challenging principle of the school. Asintya Beda Pedakatva.
Asintya Beda Tattva. That sounds complex.
It means inconceivable, simultaneous oneness and difference. It's the philosophical capstone, and it's explicitly meant to go beyond ordinary human logic.
Inconceivable. So they're saying we just can't understand it.
Not quite like giving up. It's more of a positive assertion. Our normal way of thinking demands clear categories. Things are either totally one, non-dualism, or totally separate, dualism, binary. But they argue that the divine, being infinite, possessing infinite energies or potencies, can't be boxed in by our finite, limited intellect. So how can Kanon be totally transcendent and unchanging and simultaneously be totally immanent, present within and as everything through his energy? The answer is, it's asintya, inconceivable to us.
So the inconceivable part isn't a flaw in the philosophy. It's a statement about the limits of human reason when faced with the infinite. Except the paradox, it's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. Perfectly put. Accepting this paradox is what allows for, the reality of multiplicity within this single indivisible being. Rupa Goswami uses that ocean analogy. Again, think of countless waves, bubbles, foam, droplets. They all arise within the one ocean. They are distinct forms, real expressions, but they're all just water, essentially.
So creation isn't an illusion. It's a real, meaningful expression within God's being, made of God's energy.
Yes. And that's crucial for bhakti. If the world and the soul were just illusions, then devotion, relationship, love, it would all be ultimately pointless, wouldn't it? But here, the relationship is built into the very structure of reality. It's eternal because the distinctions are real functional differences within the one energetic substance.
And that energetic substance, the universe, it's not dead matter, it's conscious energy.
It's a conscious, dynamic field of divine potency. They sometimes call it the Sakti Tantra. The material world is just the external, sort of obscured layer of that energy field. But the potential for reconnecting with the source, Katan, is always there because we are fundamentally part of that same conscious energy.
Okay, so we have this Sakti Tantra, this dynamic reality made of divine energy.
Yeah.
How is it structured? You mentioned different energies. Gacchavavedanta maps these out, right?
Yes. They categorize Katansa's infinite potency into 3 principal energies based on their function. It helps to visualize the architecture. Let's start at the top, the most essential one.
The highest energy.
That would be the Smarta Shakti. It's the internal energy. This is Kancha's own innermost constitutive power. It's what the spiritual realm itself is made of.
The spiritual realm.
Yeah.
What's that like according to this framework?
It's the eternal world, sometimes called Vaikuta, or more specifically in this tradition, Goloka Vandamna. The Sardupa Shakti is characterized by pure consciousness, Sit Shakti, pure being, or eternity, Sat, and pure bliss, Ananda. It's the very substance of God's inner life, you could say. And it's the medium through which he manifests his divine activities, his play, known as Leah. It's eternally pure, non-dual with the Lord himself. It's the zone of perfection, eternal relationships.
Okay, pure consciousness, bliss, eternity. That's the internal. What about, well, us, down here, the other end of the spectrum?
Right, the dimension we typically experience. That's governed by the Maya Shakti, the external energy.
Maya. That word usually means illusion, right?
It does, and here it refers to the extrinsic or concealing potency. Its specific job is material manifestation. It creates the conditions we experience: duality, time, birth, death, decay. It's essentially the realm where consciousness gets distorted. It's the domain of avidya, ignorance.
And what happens to us, to the soul, when it gets involved with Maya Shakti?
Well, when the soul, which is inherently conscious, turns towards Maya and starts identifying with matter, with the body, the mind, the ego, ahara, that's when entanglement happens. It leads directly to suffering, dukkha. Maya acts like this cosmic fog, obscuring our true nature, our original blissful connection to Kansa.
Okay, so we have the purely spiritual internal energy and Svarupa and the external energy. But where do we, the individual souls, the jivas, actually fit? Are we one or the other?
This is maybe the most fascinating part of the architecture. We fit into the tasta sakti, the marginal potency.
Marginal, like on the edge.
Exactly. Tata literally means a shore or a bank, like the bank of a river. The Tata Sakti is this intermediary energy positioned right on the boundary line between the pure spiritual realm of Svarupa and the material realm of Maya. And this energy is the collective of individual conscious units, the souls, the jivas.
So our very nature is to be on the fence.
Yeah.
Defined by our position between spirit and matter.
Precisely. The jiva is described as subatomic consciousness, infinitesimal, not infinite like God, but still conscious. And crucially, it possesses infinitesimal freedom, just enough free will to choose its orientation. Between turning towards the spiritual side, towards Kana and the Svarupa Shakti, or turning towards the material side, towards Maya. The sources call the jiva a metastable ontological state.
Metastable, meaning inherently unstable. Poised.
Yeah, constantly poised. Capable of polarizing one way or the other. Our existence, our experience is this constant negotiation, this tension between the call of the spiritual and the pull of the material. That's the inherent drama of the marginal state.
So we're the pivot points. Our choices essentially determine whether we align with the spiritual reality or get caught up in the material illusion.
You could say that. Going back to the ocean metaphor, if the ocean is consciousness, Svarupa is the pure, clear depths, and Maya is the murky, stormy surface. The jivas are like tiny droplets that can choose to dive deep or stay tossed about on the surface.
That marginal position, it explains both our potential for incredible love and connection and our potential for forgetting, for suffering.
Absolutely. It gives the jiva its value, the capacity to freely choose love, and its risk, the capacity to choose forgetfulness. And this whole philosophical setup is vital because it establishes why bhakti is necessary. It's the path chosen by the marginal soul to consciously turn back towards its original nature and relationship with the source.
Okay, the cosmology makes sense. Chem and the soul, distinct but related through energy. Relational non-dualism. So the goal can't be just merging or disappearing. It has to be about that relationship. How does Rupa Goswami define the ultimate goal in the BRS?
He defines it very clearly and significantly, not primarily as a state of being, but as an action. The highest bhakti is defined as dedicated service, or seva, offered to Krishna.
Service, Sev?
Yes. And there are key qualifiers. This service must be rendered pleasantly, joyfully. It has to be completely free from any material limitations or secondary motives. And maybe most importantly, it must be utterly devoid of desire for anything else. Pure, unmotivated service.
Wow. Devoid of desire for anything else. That cuts out, well, a lot of what people might think of as religious practice, doesn't it? Like praying for stuff.
It definitely rejects what you might call transactional devotion, that gimme bhakti, praying for wealth, health, success, even heavenly pleasure. If bhakti practice is done with those kinds of goals, it's considered a lower, impure form.
So what's the core idea behind seva? Why service?
The insight is that genuine, unmotivated love naturally expresses itself as the desire to please the beloved. And that active desire to please is seva. It shifts the entire focus away from what can I get to how can I please Krishna.
And you mentioned the word seva itself is important.
Very. In Sanskrit, seva is typically reserved for divine service. It carries these deep connotations of affection, dedication, honor. It's purposefully different from the word dasa, which might imply mundane servitude or even forced labor. Seva is voluntary, joyful, loving engagement. It's the soul doing what it's eternally meant to do.
Okay, loving service is the goal. Now, let's get to maybe the most controversial part, or at least the most assertive part of the BRS, this trivialization of moksha, liberation. Why does the text go so hard against moksha, which is like the ultimate goal in so much other Indian philosophies?
It's a crucial strategic move. Rupa Goswami needed to establish prima this supreme loving service as being qualitatively superior to moksha, liberation, especially the impersonal kind aimed for in jhana and yoga paths. Remember, in 16th century India, Advaita Vedanta, focused on merging with the impersonal Brahman, was incredibly influential. He had to make a powerful case for why a personal relationship was actually a higher achievement than losing oneself in the absolute.
And he uses that calf's hoof print analogy again here, right? It's not just qualitative, it's quantitative too.
Absolutely. The comparison is stark. The joy you get from realizing the impersonal Brahman in moksha. It's described as static, maybe peaceful, but ultimately limited compared to the dynamic, interactive, ever-increasing bliss of a loving relationship with the personal absolute, with Gun.
Unlimited.
The text literally says, even if you took the happiness of impersonal Brahman realization and multiplied it billions and billions of times, it still wouldn't amount to even a drop of the ocean of the happiness of devotion.
Not even a drop.
That's
Basically dismissing it entirely.
It effectively recategorizes moksha from being the ultimate prize to being something relatively insignificant when compared side by side with bhakti.
And that leads to another powerful image, the four goals of life turning into straw.
Yes, stonta, straw, worthless. It's the ultimate symbol of insignificance in classical Indian literature. The traditional four goals, dharma, duty, artha, wealth, kama, pleasure, and finally moksha, liberation, Rupa Goswami says that when even a tiny bit of genuine love for the Lord enters the heart, all those other goals just become like dry straw. They lose all their appeal, all their motivational force. A superior goal has captured the heart.
To really grasp how radical this is, we need to look at the specific types of moksha that the texts say devotees will actually walk away from. It's not just an abstract dismissal.
Exactly. The tradition outlines 5 main types of liberation, and the pure bhakta, the devotee, is said to reject all of them if they get in the way of direct loving service.
Okay, what are the 5?
Right, there's other. 1, salokya, living on the same spiritual planet as the Lord. Rejected if it just means being in the neighborhood without actually serving him.
Okay.
2, sarai, having opulence or powers equal to the Lord's, except his unique creative power. Rejected because power can feed the ego and distract from the mood of service.
Makes sense.
3, saripya, being in close physical proximity to the Lord. Also rejected if that closeness doesn't involve active personal seva. Just hanging around isn't the point.
Interesting.
4, saripya, attaining a spiritual form similar to the Lord's, like having 4 arms. Rejected because, again, the focus shifts from the function of service to the form of personal grandeur.
And then the 5th. This must be the big one.
The 5th is saucha, merging, becoming one with the impersonal absolute, dissolving individual identity. This one is the most fundamentally rejected because it completely destroys the duality needed for a loving relationship. You need 2 for love, the lover and the beloved. Merging eliminates that.
Okay, rejecting saucha, the merging. That makes sense given the focus on relationship. But rejecting the others living nearby, having similar powers or form? That's pretty intense. Why turn down being right next to Kampa?
The underlying principle is that the external status of liberation, whether it's location, power, or form, is secondary to the internal reality of the active, loving relationship expressed through seva. The texts often cite examples like Hanuman, the perfect servant of Lord Rama. Hanuman explicitly rejects moksha because he values the feeling, the bhava, of being an eternal servant far more than any state of liberation. His attitude is, "You are the Lord, I am the servant eternally." Merging, or even just achieving a liberated status without that act of service, would destroy that cherished relationship for him.
So it's not that devotees don't care about escaping suffering or rebirth. It's just that they see liberation as maybe a byproduct, something that happens along the way, but not the actual goal.
That's a great way to put it. Bhakti itself is considered so powerful that it automatically takes care of liberation. The BRS explains that devotion destroys sin, papa, the deep-rooted seeds of sin. And ignorance, avidya, just like a huge fire, instantly burns up dry fuel. You don't need a separate process to get rid of the bad stuff. Cultivating love automatically purifies everything.
So you focus on the positive goal, the love, and the negative stuff just falls away.
Exactly. You aim for the fire of love, not for getting rid of the smoke of suffering. By cultivating prema, the devotee's heart naturally becomes purified of selfishness, which is the root of suffering.
Does the text say anything about what qualities emerge from this purification, besides just lack of suffering?
Oh, yes. It says bhakti automatically bestows all good qualities. Things like truthfulness, detachment, humility, compassion. The traditional yamas and yamas of yoga, they just manifest naturally in a devotee, without them having to struggle and force it through willpower. Their consciousness becomes so focused on pleasing Keen that selfishness and malice just don't have room to grow. They become attractive to everyone, even animals, the texts say, because they radiate that purity.
So unlike maybe some ascetic paths that focus on suppressing desires, bhakti seems to work with the soul's natural tendency to love, just redirecting it.
It replaces the negative drive of material desire with the positive attraction of spiritual love. It's presented as easier, in a sense, because you're not fighting your nature, you're fulfilling it. The texts argue that trying to cut the knots of karma and ego just through intellectual knowledge or harsh austerities is really difficult and often leaves subtle desires behind. But bhakti purifies by simply overwhelming the whole system with a superior, blissful engagement.
Okay, so the goal is prema, this pure, motiveless, eternal service. But how does someone like us, stuck in this marginal state, caught up in Maya, even begin to climb towards that? That must be where the practice comes in.
Exactly. That's sadhana bhakti. Sadhana means practice, the disciplined effort. It's the methodology designed to awaken that eternally existing, but currently dormant, potential for love. The immediate goal of sadhana is to reach the stage of bhava, that foundational spiritual emotion, which then over time ripens into full-blown prema.
And Rupa Goswami breaks down this practice, this sadhana, right?
Yes, he divides it into two main types, based fundamentally on the practitioner's internal state, their motivation.
Okay, what's the first type? This sounds like where most people would start.
It is. It's called Vaidhi Bhakti. This is devotion that is practiced according to rules and regulations. Vidhi means rule or injunction. So it's structured, regulated devotion.
Why rules? Doesn't that sound a bit mechanical for love?
It's necessary because for most people starting out, that spontaneous, intense, overwhelming love, which they call raga, isn't awake yet. So Vaidhi Bhakti provides the structure, the discipline, the guardrails. You follow the instructions given in the scriptures and by the teacher, even if you don't feel spontaneous love yet. The BRS says this is essential for the average and lowest types of practitioners. It's the safe, guided path to cultivate that feeling.
So what does that discipline actually look like? Is there one core instruction for Vaidhi Bhakti?
There is. Rupa Goswami identifies one primary foundational rule that underpins everything else. It's deceptively simple. Vishnu, or Krishna, should be remembered constantly, and he should never be forgotten.
Continuous remembrance.
Continuous remembrance. All the other rules and regulations there are 64 main ones. We'll get into all the rituals, the chanting, the conduct. They were all considered secondary supports, servants to this one core practice of keeping the mind absorbed in thoughts of the divine. The focus is on mental engagement, not just forcing the senses.
Okay, that's Vaidhi, the rule-based path. What's the second type?
The second type is Raganuga Bhakti. This is where things get more advanced, more spontaneous.
Raganuga. Related to that word raga, spontaneous attraction.
Exactly. Raganuga means following anuga, the path of raga, spontaneous attachment or affection. This is devotion that arises naturally, automatically from an intense, inherent attraction to Kat Bhakti. At this stage, the devotee doesn't need the external rules of Vaidhi Bhakti anymore. Not because they're breaking them, but because their heart is just so irresistibly drawn to the Lord that following the rules becomes secondary, almost instinctual. Their internal desire has surpassed the need for external instruction. Vaidhi is transcended.
So Vaidhi is the training wheels, and Raganuga is riding freely.
That's a decent analogy, yes. Vaidhi builds the foundation, purifies the mind, and awakens the potential for raga. Raganuga is when that potential blossoms.
Okay, so if Vaidhi Bhakti is the starting point for most, who's actually eligible to begin? Some Vedantic traditions had pretty strict requirements, right? Based on caste or stage of life.
This is one of the really radical aspects of Gacha Vedanta, especially for its time. The BRS is incredibly explicit and emphatic about inclusivity. Rupa Goswami states clearly, all castes, all stages of life are eligible. Everyone.
Everyone. No restrictions based on birth, Gender, social status.
None whatsoever. He sweeps all that aside. It's a sharp contrast to, say, traditional Vedic fire sacrifices, or even some orthodox Vedanta studies that were often restricted, usually to upper caste men. Rupa Goswami says even someone born in the lowest social strata, if they just engage in hearing about Kina, chanting his names, remembering him, they become immediately purified and qualified for the highest spiritual life. The only real prerequisite is a genuine desire, a sincerity to try.
That's huge. But okay, if someone is totally caught up in material life and Maya, maybe they don't even have that desire. Where does the initial spark come from if you're perfectly happy or at least distracted by the material world?
That's where grace comes in. This is critical. The very first seed of bhakti, the initial impulse, the bija. It doesn't come from our own effort. It comes through what the text calls supi, which translates roughly as extremely good fortune.
Good fortune, like luck.
Sort of, but it's understood as manifesting specifically as the causeless mercy, the grace of the Lord himself, or, and this is considered more common, the grace of one of his advanced pure devotees. You can't earn this initial spark through austerity or study or good karma alone. It's described as an unearned gift.
So you can't pull yourself up by your own bootstraps to even start wanting bhakti.
Not according to this text, no. That initial turning towards the spiritual, especially towards bhakti, is initiated by grace. That grace is what helps pivot the soul, the jiva, with its naturally unsteady emotional nature, away from maya and towards kicha. Then, once that spark of desire is there, the person becomes truly eligible and empowered to undertake the effort, the sadhana, of Vaidhi Bhakti.
So it's this beautiful balance. Grace provides the initial opportunity, the desire, but then you have to act on it. You have to do the practice. It combines divine mercy with human responsibility.
Perfectly said. Grace opens the door, but you still have to walk through it and do the work. And that work, that sadhana, is laid out in those 64 processes we mentioned. The curriculum designed to fan that initial spark of grace into a steady flame, and eventually into the consuming fire of prema. #tag Bia. The 64 processes of practice, a categorized overview.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty then, the curriculum itself, the 64 processes of Vaidhi Bhakti. It sounds like a comprehensive list covering a lot of ground, but does Rupa Goswami give any kind of priority? Are some more important than others?
He absolutely does. This is the real practical side of the deep dive. The 64 items cover a huge range, things like external conduct, purification, respecting sacred things, internal mental practices, cultivating specific emotions. It's very detailed. But yes, he definitely groups them and highlights certain ones. We should probably start with the ones he puts right at the beginning, the ones that establish the connection, the channel for receiving guidance.
Okay, the foundational ones. And these seem to revolve around the guru, the spiritual teacher.
Yes, the first three listed are considered the most important primary practices, and they all relate to the guru, emphasizing the need for guidance within an authorized lineage, the parampara.
What are they?
Number 1, surrender to the feet of a guru. This means formally accepting a qualified spiritual guide who embodies the teachings.
Surrender, that's a strong word.
It implies trust and humility. Yeah. Number 2, receiving initiation and instruction regarding Krishna. This involves getting the specific practices, like the mantra, and understanding the philosophy from that qualified source. And number 3, serving the guru with trust, actively engaging in service to the teacher, which is seen as a primary way to purify the ego and show sincere dedication.
Okay, guru is central. Accepting guidance, receiving instruction, serving. This highlights the importance of a human teacher, someone who can transmit the bija, that seed of bhakti. But let's be real, in any system that places so much emphasis on a human authority, there's always a potential for things to go wrong, for exploitation. Does the tradition acknowledge that?
That's a really important question. And yes, while the BRS strongly emphasizes the necessity of the guru, the ideal presented is extremely high. The true guru must be genuinely pure, self-realized, completely detached from material gain or ego, a living example of selfless service. The texts actually advise the seeker to first sincerely pray to Ishwara, to God within the heart, and ask him to lead them to a genuinely qualified teacher. The idea is to bypass your own ego's tendency to be attracted by charisma or external show and rely on divine guidance to find someone truly transparent. The guru is meant to be a medium, not the ultimate destination.
Okay, so the ideal is very high, even if the reality can sometimes fall short. Moving on from the guru practices, what about things to avoid? Negative instructions seem just as important for keeping the practice pure.
Absolutely. Rupa Goswami lists several key practices to be avoided, or restraints. These are seen as crucial for protecting that fragile seedling of devotion, especially in the early stages.
What are some key ones?
Okay, first, keeping association with non-devotees at a distance. This isn't about social snobbery. It's about psychological protection. Being constantly surrounded by people who are cynical, materialistic, or actively hostile to spiritual values can really weaken your own budding faith and resolve.
Makes sense. Protecting the inner environment.
Exactly. Second, and this is interesting, avoiding the acquisition of numerous disciples. This is aimed squarely at potential teachers or leaders.
Avoiding disciples, isn't that counterintuitive?
It seems so, but the reasoning is that accumulating followers easily feeds the ego. You get attached to praise, position, control. It becomes a distraction from the real inner goal of prema. It's a subtle but powerful trap.
Wow. Okay, what else?
Third, refraining from undertaking large, ambitious projects, like getting overly involved in building huge temples or complex organizations. The concern is that these things inevitably draw you into politics, fundraising, management, prestige, all very material entanglements that pull the mind away from internal cultivation of love. The external can start to replace the internal.
That's a warning you don't often hear.
It's quite specific. And fourth, giving up excessive attachment to studying many books, explaining scriptures professionally, or engaging in argumentation. Basically, avoiding intellectual pride or using knowledge or artistic skill primarily for reputation or winning debates, rather than for genuine devotion. Again, it's about guarding against ego traps.
So the pattern seems to be protect your fledgling devotion from negative influences and protect yourself from the ego traps of success, whether it's followers, buildings, or intellectual status. Prioritize sincerity over visibility.
That sums it up beautifully. The path demands deep internal sincerity, and these restraints are designed to cut off the subtle ways the ego tries to hijack the process and pull you back towards material motivations, away from that continuous remembrance of concept.
Okay, so beyond the guru and the things to avoid, we have the main body of practices. You said the core principle is continuous remembrance. How do the 64 processes help achieve that?
Right. Many of the 64 fall under the umbrella of the classical 9 main types of devotional service, the Nava, the Bhakti. These are the active ways you engage your senses and mind in Kaltani service.
The 9 types, can you list those?
Sure. There's hearing Shrabha, listening to stories, philosophy, glories of the Lord. Chanting Kirtana, singing or reciting his names, glories, prayers. Remembering Smara, focused meditation on his form, qualities, activities. Serving the Lord's feet, Padasivanam, often relates to temple worship or honoring sacred places. Worship Arkhana, formal deity worship with rituals and offerings. Offering prayers, Vandanam, formal or heartfelt prayers. Acting as a servant, Dasya, cultivating that mood of service. Developing friendship, Sakya, cultivating intimacy. And complete self-surrender, Atman Nivedandam, dedicating everything, mind, body, words.
That's a pretty comprehensive list covering ritual, internal focus, different relationship moods. Let's focus on remembering Smarana for a second, since you said that's the absolute core of Vaidhi Bhakti. How does the BRS guide someone to achieve continuous remembrance? That sounds hard.
It is hard, and Smaranta isn't just casual thinking. It's presented as a structured meditation with stages designed to deepen focus gradually.
Stages like?
It starts with maybe simple remembrance, just a fleeting thought, recalling the name or form briefly. Then it progresses to fixed remembrance, where you consciously hold the focus on the Lord's form or a specific pastime for a noticeable period. Then comes meditation, Aibaina, which is described as a prolonged, uninterrupted flow of thought toward the object, like oil pouring smoothly from one vessel to another, no breaks. And finally, the culmination is absorption, samadhi, where the mind is so completely immersed that the distinction between the meditator, the act of meditating, and the object of meditation seems to dissolve in the experience, though. Importantly for bhakti, the devotee retains that functional sense of self in order to continue serving.
So Smaranta is really about training the mind, taking it from its usual scattered state, that marginal chaos, and teaching it to focus deeply and continuously on the divine.
Exactly. It's about transforming the mind from being the source of distraction into the primary tool for connection. By keeping the mind engaged with something supremely pure, the mind itself becomes purified.
Beyond those core 9 practices, what are some other examples from the 64 that maybe highlight how this path tries to integrate the sacred into everyday life?
Oh, there are many detailed instructions about conduct and honoring sacredness. Things like respecting sacred objects and places, showing deep reverence for scriptures like the Bhagavata Puja, for temples, deities, and holy places like Vandavana. This includes practical things like bowing down, not stepping on temple grounds improperly, observing vows. Following specific practices on certain days, like fasting on Ekadashi, the 11th day of the lunar cycle, this is seen as important for minimizing material influence and enhancing spiritual focus.
Uh-huh.
Honoring other devotees, the importance of respecting all devotees regardless of their background or current level, bowing down to them. This reinforces that inclusivity we talked about. And cleanliness, and offering food. Strict rules about physical and ritual cleanliness, and the crucial practice of offering all food to cup first, prasada, before eating. This simple act transforms the basic material necessity of eating into a devotional practice.
It really sounds like the BRS aims to create a whole life structure, where almost everything you do, from eating to interacting with people to where you walk, becomes a reminder, reinforcing that focus on Kya.
It effectively creates a sacred container for the practitioner. Vaidhi Bhakti, through these detailed rules, helps structure reality around Kya as the central point, making it harder for the mind, for the jiva, to slip back into default mode, back into attachment to Maya.
Okay, so we have this detailed list of 64 practices. But then Rupa Goswami does something else, right? He highlights a very small number as being especially powerful.
Yes, absolutely. Towards the end of the discussion on sadhana, he identifies 5 superior final practices. He actually lists them, discusses other things, and then lists them again to really hammer home their importance. These 5 are considered exceptionally potent gateways for moving from the effortful practice of sadhana towards the dawning of spontaneous emotion, bhava.
The top 5, what are they?
Okay, here they are. 1. Enjoying the meanings of the Bhagavata Purakan with sensitive people. The Bhagavata is considered the postgraduate text, full of Kacha's intimate pastimes, lila. Engaging with its meaning, especially with others who are spiritually attuned, is seen as deeply moving for the heart.
So study, but communal and heart-focused.
Yes. 2. Associating with the highest affectionate saints, sadhasaga, of a similar temperament. Associating with advanced devotees is often called the fast track. Devotion is seen as somewhat contagious. Being near those who already have prama helps you catch that mood. Finding those whose devotional mood resonates with yours is key.
Community again, sadhasaga.
Crucial. 3. Singing the names of the Lord, kirtana. This directly engages the senses, tongue, ears, mind, all focused on the sound vibration of the Lord. This is often highlighted as the single most effective practice for this current age.
Kirtana, very central in this tradition.
Very. 4. Celebrating sacred days, especially the appearance day of Krishna, Janmatimi. Honoring these times helps solidify remembrance and allows the devotee to immerse themselves mentally in the Lord's activities, deepening affection.
Makes sense.
And 5. Living in a holy place, Dhammavasa, specifically Mathura, which includes Vrindavana. The idea is that the sacred environment itself, the land where Katan performed his pastimes, is spiritually charged and automatically helps evoke remembrance and devotion just by being there.
That's fascinating. Looking at those 5, hearing reading stories with others, associating with saints, singing together, celebrating together, living in a sacred place. 4 out of 5 are inherently relational or communal. They're not primarily about silent, solitary, inward-focused meditation.
That's a fantastic observation, and it really underscores the core nature of this path. Bhakti is fundamentally about relationship, about falling in love, about connection. Love needs an object, it needs expression, it needs stories, shared experience. It thrives in connection. So it makes sense that the most potent practices are the ones that most directly engage the heart and the senses in that relational dynamic with Kunta and with his devotees. It's a very different feel from paths focused solely on transcending form into silent, impersonal awareness. #tag outro Rupo.
Wow, okay, this has been a really deep dive into the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. We've covered a lot from the high-level metaphysics, that relational non-dualism, down to the very specific practical steps, the 64 processes.
It really is a comprehensive system. The takeaway, I think, is understanding this path as deeply relational. Rooted in that asintya the idea that the universe isn't some mistake or illusion, but it's Kancha's own conscious, blissful energy, the Sakti Tantra. And within that reality, an eternal loving relationship, Siva, is not only possible, but the highest goal. The aim isn't to escape, but to connect, to serve through pure, motiveless love, prema.
And we saw how radically this path reevaluates other spiritual goals, particularly moksha. Liberation isn't rejected as false exactly, but seen as, well, just profoundly limited, a tiny drop compared to the infinite ocean of bhakti. The whole focus shifts to cultivating that loving relationship as something inherently superior to just achieving a state of release or merging.
Which brings us maybe to a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder. The tradition itself states that Kancha might grant Moksha liberation relatively easily, sometimes even as just a side benefit to his devotees. But, the texts say, he very rarely grants the genuine taste, the deep desire for pure bhakti.
He gives away liberation more easily than
That's
the other thing. He gives away the desire for loving service.
That's the implication. So, if achieving self-realization or liberation is offered more freely, but the intense longing for that loving personal connection is guarded so carefully, so rarely bestowed, what does that tell us about the perceived value, the unique preciousness, the sheer intensity of this particular path of devotion?
That is quite a provocative distinction to think about, the value placed on relationship itself.
Indeed.
Well, this has been incredibly detailed and insightful. Thank you. And as we conclude, a reminder. For more information, please contact Sachin J. Karnik at the email address provided in the description box.